welcome back to the Larson Hicks Show. It's good to have you here. I am doing kind of a medley episode. I've got a handful of things, 5 or so things that I want to talk about, and just context. This show has always been about responding to questions or conversations that I'm having with friends, usually from church, and so that's really what's driving all of this. So I've kind of built up a list when people ask me. It's kind of an ask me anything sort of question episode. So when people ask me a question or suggest something, or I just make a note of it and try to get around to recording it. And I just have a little bit of time today, so I figured I'd try to just squeeze this in. If you're just joining this podcast for the first time, welcome. It's good to have you. And I would love to commend our last episode I recorded last week with my friend Joffrey Swait on intellectual immune systems. I thought that was a really fun conversation. I think an important conversation, and hopefully the conversation was helpful. So check that one out if you haven't. All right, so let's dive in. The first item on my list today is the topic of celebrity pastors. I think it's common to kind of hate on celebrity pastors. If you're obviously not a huge fanboy of a celebrity pastor, then you're probably in the other camp. And I would just say, on this topic, is it wrong for someone to be a celebrity or to be really well known? Well, was Jesus well known? Did he have crowds following him? Was David or was Joseph? The scripture's full of men who are famous in their own time and place, and so I don't think that is a cause for concern in and of itself. But what I would say is there are some things to say about this. One is how did a pastor become a quote unquote celebrity pastor? Well, if that pastor's time and energy and the church's budget is devoted to propping up his status as a celebrity, then that would be a problem. Now, if you're a early 30s pastor who is employing all of the tricks of social, search engine optimization and savvy media production and social media engagement, and you're seeking to increase your viewership and reach through all of these various tricks and all of the energy that you're putting into this stuff, then I think that's a problem. I think you're grasping for something prematurely, that God hasn't yet given you. So it's not that he wouldn't give it to you, but I think you want influence because your content is solid and people share it and seek it out. And I think I think all of the strategies and marketing tips and tricks that people are using to grow their audience, I think that's a problem. Does it mean that you shouldn't talk about things that are controversial because you don't want to, you're nervous of? I think there's a gut check that we should all have as leaders in the church, that what's our motive, what's our focus. And if you're a full-time pastor, you're a full-time pastor. And so having a podcast can and should be a logical outgrowth of that. But if it's an in and of itself, you should maybe ask for a raise. Like if you're not making enough money as a pastor to support your family, but you're having to build a big revenue stream from social media or from other enterprises. I'm not saying it's bad to be bivocational, have another job, but I think the lines get blurry, and it's hard sometimes when I'm listening to some of these podcasts who are constantly advertising to me to join their paid behind the scenes thing or their products that they're selling or whatever. It's hard for me to take them to really. I think it undermines their credibility. I think when you start to see all these advertisements for things. And asking for money, it's like, okay, you're actually doing this for money, and I think it rightfully should give a listener pause to go, okay, what's really driving this content? I just, at worst, I think it's unbecoming, of a pastor, of a minister of the gospel. I think at best, I should say, it's unbecoming. I think at worst, it's dangerous, it's bad, and I would say a young pastor who's through through savvy media tactics has built a big audience. I would just say, brother, you've got you're creating a situation that you need to be prepared to be responsible for. You've got people all over the country who are starting to sit under your teaching and look to you as an authority, but you haven't earned that. God hasn't given that to you. That's something you've grasped at. And I would just say I don't think that's something that any of us should be. If you're aspiring to be an author and to be an influencer, a social media influencer, which is one of the most popular job titles, if you ask kids these days, what do you want to be when you grow up? A lot of them say social media influencer. If you just want to be a social media influencer, go do that. Just go do that and be a Christian social media influencer. Just be honest about it. But when it's like, well, I'm a pastor, but I'm also doing this, I think it creates problems, and people have a deep-seated kind of father hunger or pastor hunger. People want to have a shepherd, want to be part of something. And so you're sort of making yourself a target. For people all over the country to get discontent with their own pastors, their own shepherds, and start sitting under your teaching. And I just think that's not the way to do it. Is somebody like Doug Wilson, who's got a huge following, and now you have Canon Press that promotes a lot of stuff. Is that the same thing? Well, no. Doug's been a pastor for 40 plus years. His influence has grown through just lots and lots of content and lots of faithful ministry that has slowly developed an audience. And there's now a for-profit publishing house in their hometown. It started as a church ministry, and at some point they said, this is really a business. Let's just completely separate it. But it's a Christian publishing house, so they're putting out a lot of Doug's stuff. He's a prolific writer, and he's got a big audience, and people love his stuff. I love his stuff. So I don't see that as a problem. I think the problem comes in, so I don't see it as a problem with Pastor Wilson. I see it as a problem with me and with my peers if we start to view him as our pastor, and start to stop listening to our own elders. And I'll just say this, this may come up later, but what I'd say about my own church, our church here in Huntsville, our session of elders and pastors are tirelessly working to feed the flock and to defend the flock against sheep, wolves in sheep clothing. We're tirelessly, and I mean that sincerely, working to fight the battles that we think face us and our congregation in our time and place. And what I've seen is, and this may be a good segue into my next point, what I've seen is a lot of people who are really amped up about other fights that other people are excited about elsewhere, and a growing discontent that we're not fighting those fights, and we're boomers because we don't see that there's this important fight that we're not engaged in. And my point is just come talk to your session, come ask your pastors. They probably are very intentionally choosing to or not to fight in those things, and you should ask yourself, why am I letting other pastors determine what I'm going to care about, what fights I'm going to fight? Why don't I join in to the work of the local church? So that's my point. I'll kind of use that as a segue from celebrity pastors to the next topic, which is this idea of being addicted to red pills. And this could be a whole episode in and of itself, but I kind of popped off on the Biblical Horizons listserv this week on this topic, and got some feedback, and this came up because we've had some issues in our church that we're trying to kind of get to the bottom of, and this was a comment that a member of our church made that I thought was so helpful and insightful. Was people get addicted to red pills. People want more and more red pills, and the more I thought about it, the more I thought, well, I think for a lot of these folks, they're newly reformed, and in terms of their theology, we're a Reformed church, so they've more recently become Reformed, and even being reformed to these people is a red pill. It's a awakening to a whole other way of viewing the Bible and history and theology that they were invisible to before they took the red pill. Right? They were oblivious to. So that whole world was invisible to them prior to taking the red pill. And so just joining the church, was a sort of taking a red pill. And then they get into the CREC, into our church, and they go, what's the next red pill? It's like, oh, have you gotten into postmillennialism? You need to take that red pill. It's going to blow your mind. And it's like, have you gotten into pedo communion? Oh, you should take that red pill. Like, you're going to see it's the best. And you just keep going and going and going. And I think what happens is there's this like addiction to red pills. It's like, I like, what's the next red pill? I want to know. Is it some conspiracy theory that I didn't know about, or is it some alternative view of history? Is it some diet thing? And I talk about this stuff a lot because, frankly, this is the crap that tears churches apart, and this is the crap that leads sheep astray. Is this like addiction, to these and what it really is Gnosticism. I think it's the same problem of Gnosticism. Here is some new perspective that explains everything. Some secret knowledge that I can have, and it's going to save me and my family. It's going to save our church. It's going to save our society. And so there's this quest for what is this? What other secret knowledge do I need that's going to change everything? And the reason why Gnosticism is a heresy is that secret knowledge doesn't save you. Like, having some secret knowledge, we're saved by faith. We're not saved by knowledge, by secret knowledge. When we get to, I heard an analogy the other day of, somebody shows up to the pearly gates, and St. Peter says, just one last question before I let you in. Let me hand you a piece of paper. There's just a little test, and on the test it says, explain salvation by faith, or describe how salvation by faith works, sola fide. And I'm probably botching the delivery of this, but the person looks at it and turns around and hands it back, and St. Peter says, that's the right answer, you're in. And it was kind of, the point was, you're not going to understand these things. It's deep mysteries, and you're not saved because you understand them completely or perfectly. And so don't take that, don't believe that. So addiction to red pills, I think it's something that we should be thinking about, asking ourselves, do I fall into that category? Am I somebody who is just constantly seeking after the next big thing, the next big idea that kind of turns the world on its head and is going to make me a better Christian? I would just say, again, look to your pastors. Your pastors, your elders are actually doing their darndest to try to expose the lies and cast a vision for where we're heading and fight the good fight, and so if you come across some red pill, some new thing, a great place to start is to go to your pastor and say, hey, what do you think about this? Is this something we should be worried about? And I said this in another episode with Rich Lusk, is it's a great thing for Christians to frequently say, I don't know, and I don't care. Like, that's a good place to be. And if your pastor says that, he's saying, I like, this isn't the thing. This isn't the thing to focus on. I don't know, and I don't really care, and you really probably shouldn't either, right? So I'll stop there, but I thought that was a good way to think about some of this stuff, addiction to red pills. Okay, the next one is homeschooling or parenting and homeschooling ADD boys, or ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity boys. I love this because I am, definitely ADD, ADHD. As a matter of fact, I went to a school for like a year and a half when I was in 7th grade and 8th grade for kids with learning disabilities. I was such a problem in all of my classes. I literally, every class I had up to that age, probably starting in elementary school, every teacher had a special chair for me, usually in the corner or in a closet or in a cubicle or in the hallway. Literally, every single teacher. Because I was just such a problem in classes. So I wanted to dominate. I wanted to make everyone laugh. I wanted to entertain everybody. I wanted to. I couldn't sit still. It's just that was me. So I was one of these boys. So I have a lot of sympathy, and I have several of these boys. I've got several boys that fit this description very well. So how do you do this? How does this work? And I think schools, there's a different solution for this at a school, at an all-day school. And I'm not going to try to pretend like I know how to do that, because I don't. But I have parented and homeschooled with my wife several of these boys, and am actively doing that today. And I can tell you kind of some things that have worked for me. One of the things I'll mention is when you've got a kid who really gets overwhelmed by a bunch of desk work, busy work. One of the first things I did, and I had to develop these. Actually, honestly, I developed my own skills for dealing with this. Really what it is masculine, young man, masculine energy. A lot of it. But not to say that people who don't struggle with this stuff are not masculine, but it's a boy thing. It's not a girl thing generally. So one of the first things was, like for me, multisensory is one of the things, like needing a lot of stimuli, right? And so for me, having headphones on that are playing music is really helpful. It's just it's like my brain doesn't work well in silence. My brain works better with more going on around me. I remember when I was a waiter, one of my early jobs in high school as a waiter, and I remember being like, I love this. I love it when there's 20 tables in my section and I'm running around like refilling coffee and grabbing something and dropping something off and taking an order, and like just all of that intense, like I felt like I was in the Matrix and like in bullet time, like everything around me was like moving slow and I was like fat. Like I realized something about myself in that moment, that I function better with lots of stimuli. And so that's just how I think some guys are wired. I think ADD is kind of that. So multisensory, having, sometimes quiet is hard for people, boys with this. I go to coffee shops a lot of times to work. And again, I put headphones on usually, but just people and activity going on sort of helps me focus more. So that's one idea. What I did with one of my sons was, he was overwhelmed with the amount of work he had every day. What I would do is I go, okay, let's take all of your assignments for the day, and let's just use a real conservative estimate. What's the max amount of time this Latin assignment's going to take? 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 45? Okay. Let's just take all the worst case scenario, of how long everything's going to take. Because he's looking at it going, this is going to kill me. How do I do this? Just really dejected. And so we took every single subject, and I got him to give me a number. You give me a number. And we added it all up. And then we said, okay, if all of this actually takes as long as you say, let's do the math. If we started now, when would you be done with all of this? And usually it was like, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, noon. It's like, this really isn't all that much work if you stay focused. It sounds like a lot. It looks like a lot when it's sort of unstructured in your brain. But when you actually break it down and look at it, it's like, okay, I could. And so it's like, okay, well, what would you do if you got done by 1 o'clock? Like, what would you do? Oh man, I'd go fish. I'd go to the creek. I'd go ride my bike. I'd go, play with my airsoft gun, whatever. Like, okay, well, like that could happen today. You could be doing that from 1 p.m. until dinner today if you get this done. So why don't we do this? Let's start with the easiest one, kind of debt snowball style. Dave Ramsey. Start with the easiest one. I'm gonna set a timer. We'll put it right here on the table. It's a race. Here's the timer. Ready, set, go. And then go. And then as soon as he finishes, almost inevitably, because we were really conservative in our estimate, he'd finish early and go, look at that, dude. Move it back from 1 to 12:55. Like you just bought yourself 5 minutes. Go take a quick 5-minute break. Go downstairs, get a quick snack, get a drink of water, and be back up here in 3 minutes. Okay, great. And so like just creating some momentum and doing lots of rewards, I think lots of breaks and changes in activities is another thing. So setting timers so you can see that I'm actually knocking stuff out. You get to cross that off the list, check off the box. That stuff really helps. I have another son right now who whose day is so when they're working, I think structure really helps. So when they're working, have it be as structured as you can. It's focused, it's intense, but set timers, like have a clear, this is gonna be over at this time, and then we're gonna take a break. So I've got one son who is in high school now, but he's his morning from like 8 a.m. to noon is pretty structured. He's got a lot of classes and a lot of work he's doing, head down. And as soon as it's all done, he hops up from his chair, goes to the gym, makes himself a protein shake, goes to the gym, works out, comes home, makes lunch, and then he's back up here and he's ready to hit homework and start working on the next thing. And then, there's other times in the day where it's like, I'm going to go, do some other activity, but just changing locations, doing things, having breaks, getting to turn off the thing and focus on something else. I think that helps for ADD people. It helps them kind of focus on better when they're actually in the middle of it. So I hope that was helpful. I hope there were some things in there. The last thing I'd say is bribery is wonderful. I view my wife and I view bribery as training wheels. We're trying to develop habits in our kids. And so if we can say, hey, if you get done with this, you're going to get to do X, or you're going to get this kind of snack or whatever. I love that. For school and for just general obedience. I love bribing my kids because it's a tool. It's a tool to help my kids develop habits. And it's I don't care that in their heart, they're trying to earn a candy, by respecting their mom or by getting their work done. I'm okay with that. As they grow older and more mature, we're going to continue to take those training wheels off, right? But force of habit's a real thing. Momentum's a real thing. So look for ways to create momentum and habit. Okay, jumping over to the next topic. I don't know how much I'm going to say about this. This is about college. A conversation I was having this week about college, and my oldest son is in college right now, and a comment I made to my brother was, one of the biggest values I think of college. One of the reasons why college has been so popular in the world is it's a place to find a spouse. And especially, I would say for young women. Young women need and want to find a spouse, and their dads want them to find a spouse. That's a good thing, and dads want their daughters to marry good men, and women are attracted to men who are better than them. By better, I'm talking about this phenomenon. It's called hypergamy. In kind of the manosphere is where I've kind of heard this term, but this idea that women marry up. Women look for a man who's taller, who comes from better sort of social class, somebody who's more educated. And it makes sense because women are called to submit to their husbands, to follow their husband's lead. They're signing up at the word submission. You guys have heard me say the word submission just means under mission. And so a woman is looking for a man they can follow. And so it makes sense that they're looking for a man that they view as better than them in some ways. And so the brand, a college itself, just the brand of a college signals quality, right? So when somebody's going to Harvard, we know that that's a signal about the kind of man that is, right? And so those college brands are a tool that we use to determine what kind of people are going to be here generally. And so dads, I think wisely go, what kind of men do I think I want to try to put my daughter around, give her the best chance of finding a good man that she's going to be able to respect. And sometimes it's hard to find locally. So I think it's a great tool for a wise father and wise parents to use in order to try to help their kids find a spouse. And it goes both ways. I just think it's a lot more important and more of there's more urgency with a young woman, as we should know. There's a biological clock that's ticking, and our world says that you need to focus on your career. That's just a disaster, for most women. It doesn't mean you should just sit around waiting to be married. That's why I think college is great. Go get an education. Go better yourself. Go become a strong, capable wise, shrewd, well-educated woman, so that you can be the best wife, mother, and when I think of wife, I think of Proverbs 31, which is not someone who's just sitting around making babies and washing dishes. There are phases where that's a lot of the job, but the Proverbs 31 lady is a brilliant businesswoman. She's an executive. She's got a staff. She's taking products to market. She's doing real estate deals. So go get educated. That's a great thing for if you as a father think about, this is the woman who's going to be raising up my grandkids, and what kind of grandkids do I want? They're going to need a mom who can help them become the kind of men and women that I want my grandkids to be. So think about that. I think college is great for that. There was a challenge to that concept that I've heard people throw out, that somehow sending your daughter to college is an abdication of headship. I think that's ridiculous. I certainly think it could be, if you don't care, if you're not parenting and if your daughter is not under your authority in any way, and you're just sending her off to University of Alabama to join a sorority and have no protection, then yeah, you are abdicating your headship. But that abdication started a long time ago. If you are doing what I just described, and you are a godly father who is looking to provide for his daughter, and particularly provide a future husband for them, and you choose to use college as a tool for that, and you don't have your head in the sand about what happens at college, and you're not thinking carefully about the kind of college that you want to send your daughter to, that's where you get into trouble here. But I think what I'm describing is actually a real headship. It's serious headship, not some wooden rule, pharisaical version of headship. It reminds me of the I Kiss Dating Goodbye stuff, or the courtship stuff. It's like courtship with a TM next to it. It's like a brand. It's like, and there's only one model, and you have to do it this way, and you have to follow these rules step by step. That's stupid. That's not wisdom. That's the opposite of wisdom. Courtship is a principle. It's a biblical principle that a wise father and mother apply, and godly young men respect, and seek to also follow. But it's not a wooden set of rules that you can just apply, and then you get to say, well, I did it right. My kids all did the courtship thing. It's like, good job, congratulations. So yeah, I wouldn't let somebody throw in shade at your choice to send your daughter to college deter you from it. If you're being a wise father or wise parents, you can absolutely maintain your responsibility and authority. It's difficult, but it's difficult for your daughter to go to summer camp or to go to their grandma's house for the weekend or something. I mean, you can't, headship doesn't equal line of sight oversight, and you lock your daughters up anytime you can't directly watch them. That's ridiculous. So anyway, all right, moving on. Last thing, and I kind of started to get into this earlier, so maybe this will tie back in, but there's this. I think this generation, the generation I'm speaking of, is really 20 to 30 somethings, men in our circles. I see spending a lot of time on the internet, Reddit and 4chan and forums and I see them getting worked up about a lot of things, and then this ties back in again to kind of some of the red pill thing and the celebrity pastor thing, but then when their elders at their church or pastors don't seem to be aware of these things or care about them, the thought is, well, you're just a boomer. Okay, boomer, you don't understand, And then when you talk to them about it and they go, that's stupid, you shouldn't be into that, or you shouldn't care about that. It's like, okay, boomer, you don't get it. And it's like, and it's coming from the people it's coming from, I've seen are the young men who claim that they wish that the older generation would have done a better job of training them. So a lot of them are saying, I feel like my dad didn't give me the kind of training to be a godly, masculine man. And so, and they lament that. And then they go to the internet to find it. And sadly, dismiss the actual older men in their community who would love to guide them and provide them with wisdom and invest in them. The men who actually are doing those things. So I just think that's worth pointing out. It's a kind of ageism, it's a kind of chronological snobbery, is another term I think Lewis talked about. Just if an idea is old, it must be bad, and the newer ideas are better. It's the same. It's that same kind of thing. It's certainly ageism. But it also is just wisdom. I mean, the reason why Scripture tells us to look to older women and men for wisdom scripturally is that you age helps, and as you get older, you tend to move towards more humility. You tend to become less excitable about every new thing. You start to see the patterns and go, I've seen this kind of stuff come and go a lot of times, and it's not that big a deal. Every presidential election in my lifetime has been the biggest deal in the world, and the whole union was going to come crashing down if we didn't. And I'm acknowledging that we live in crazy times and that our society is in really bad shape. My point is just that I'm fighting the battle. I'm in the middle of it. Your session is in the middle of it. We're fighting the battle. We're not putting our heads in the sand. We just disagree about how to do that, and we don't agree with the internet prophets and the internet rabble rousers and the people in the dark alley. The kind of fellowship of the young, immature men that hide out to talk about edgy things that the boomers don't understand. Like that's pretty typical. Doug Wilson would call it fathead. It's just typical young fathead stuff. Like young fathead men have been doing this for time immemorial. I've heard Socrates complaining about the generation of fatheads in his time. This isn't new, and you'll realize it as you get older, Lord willing. But or you could listen to Scripture and honor the hoary head. Honor the older men in your midst, and actually seek to submit to their teaching and authority, and submission. I'll say this: submission is as submission does. Okay, so it's one thing to say on paper, oh yeah, no, I submit to my, I'll definitely submit to my authorities. Okay, well, show me how you're doing that. Give me some examples of where you're submitting to your authorities on these issues that you're worked up about. Are you submitting to your authorities on that? Oh no, they're boomers. They don't get it. I'm not even going to talk to them because they'll freak out. Okay, well, that doesn't sound like submission to me. That sounds like you're making an excuse for not submitting. And so what I would say is, especially on those things, go to if you're getting worked up, if you're going, man, this looks like a big deal and I think it's something we should care about, that's a great opportunity to go submit to your elders and go, hey, elders, are you guys aware of this? Like, this is something I'm getting into and I'm finding out seems like a big deal and I'm kind of worried about it. And then be ready for their answer, be ready for, and the answer may be, that's interesting. I haven't heard of that. Let me look into it. Or I've seen that and I am not worried about it. And here's why. We can talk more about it. Or anything in between. The point is, sometimes someone's a boomer, somebody's guilty of being a boomer because they don't care about something, because they had the wisdom and the pattern recognition to immediately see it and dismiss it and choose, I'm not gonna burn calories on this thing. I've got bigger fish to fry. I know what this kind of thing generally is and where it leads to, and I'm not gonna. This is the thing. Our time is so limited, and it's the most precious resource we have. So wise men and women always have to make these choices about what am I going to invest my time and energy into. And young men and women tend to have a lot less responsibility in their lives. They're not running businesses and have big families, complicated families. When your kids become teenagers, things get more complicated. So things are pretty simple. When you're a young parent, you're not necessarily in leadership at your church, responsible for anything. So you should have less responsibility. That's just a fact of life. You get more responsibility typically as you get older, and so your time isn't as constrained when you're younger. And so it's a real challenge is what to do with your time. And older people, as their time gets more precious and constrained, they have to be more judicious about going, I'm not going to burn calories and time on that particular issue. And you apply wisdom. So it's not to say there's not stuff, there's plenty of stuff that we're not aware of and we haven't thought about, and that we would, your session, your leaders, your elders, pastors need to hear from you. They want to hear from you. They're your shepherds. They want to shepherd you. So what a blessing to have I'll tell you, it's my favorite. And I know the pastors at our church talk about this. It's their favorite thing in the world is when somebody comes and says, I'm struggling with this Bible verse. I don't understand it. Or I'm struggling with this thing that's confusing to me. Or I'm hearing a lot of this and I'm just, could you help me think through it? That's what pastors and elders live for, is having that kind of relationship with the flock. So just lean into it. And, if you have a session that is prone to overreaction and freaking out and chomping down on you, that's another issue. And that's something to prayerfully think about and seek wisdom about. You might have to go to someone else outside your church, some wiser advisor, and say, hey, how do I deal with this? My session wants to accuse me of heresy every time I ask any question. Okay, that is a problem. But you need wisdom there. You're not going to get wisdom on the internet with a bunch of red pill trolls. So, all right. Well, there's my 5 topics in this kind of mashup recording. I hope that this was profitable in some way or another for you. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.